Hey guys, today we are going to do a tutorial on how I painted up this line right here. And it's on a 12 by 16 aluminum panel, airbrushed, and then clear coated with Spray Packs 2K clear coat. That's where all that shiny stuff comes from. Try to keep those reflections off you. Let's roll into the tutorial. Talk to you guys here in a little bit. So I started out with a little chalk pencil marking, and then I'm going to use Createx Wicked Opaques in purple, blue, red, and then just a little bit of yellow. When I use that yellow, notice I got it really, really dotty, and that was by turning the pressure down, so it just created a bunch of stippling effect in there. Then I'm going to come in here, I'm using my PS771 to lay in my white. I'm using golden high flow white in this particular instance, and I will come in here and start defining my major shapes within the picture. Notice how I will, as I'm working, I'm working in bold but gestural strokes. I'm not trying to get any real fine detail in here. And so that I can get that kind of wispy floating out and disappearing into the background, notice I'm just using very bold, or not bold, but very light strokes but they're very quick, gestural. They're not, trying to get a lot of detail in here. There's not going to be a lot of detail in this painting. And I will fill everything in, and we will have white in just about all of the picture. But I'm just building it up with brighter with a light white, and therefore it's going to create depth because I'm not completely just flood filling. So all those little spots that are left out are going to come to the forefront later, and will create some of that illusion of having some fur going on. Working without a photographic reference, obviously for this exact, I am using some other references, but I don't have this exact pose in a photograph. So you kind of got to hunt and peck your way around. And like I said, notice how rough shaped everything is. Notice how it doesn't look like it's going to be much when we get done based upon how I'm laying it in there. And so again, because I'm working with just a light mix of white and just gently, the PS771, being that it's a detail brush, doesn't want to throw out a lot of paint anyway, so I used that to my advantage in this circumstance. Then I'll go through and start putting in a handful of smaller hairs. You can see them pull in, and right there what I'm doing is the stippling effect, whereas you let paint get on the tip and then just let it blow off. So I will define the spot off of his muzzle and put a lot more white in there than I have in other places, because I need that to be much brighter in the end. And so we will fill that in. Sometimes I will come through, as you can see, and I'm putting strokes, and this for the section underneath his mouth. We got a lot of hair there, so it's in my best interest to continue to create strokes as I build up each layer. Then shortly I will come in here and start bringing in color. As far as the eyes, it's really, really simple. It's just laying in some white in there and then leaving out the little spot for the black. But I will have to come back in and fill them in, because the white overspray tends to drift around a lot more when you're working with white overspray. That is a texture stencil that I'm using there, and I will show you guys another way to get that look. That stencil is currently not available on the market. Alright guys, so I know that's moving pretty fast, so let's throw some tips in here. We got some tips coming right at you. Alright guys, so that particular stencil this one came from Tommy Ham, and I'll show you guys. You can take also a dryer sheet, but you don't have the firmness with a dryer sheet. Before I got that stencil from Tommy, I used to take, this is the backside of filtered material from Rolled Filtered Materials, the white stuff. I would take 3 or 4 pieces of this, and then I would take that, put it on some parchment paper, and iron it to make these a nice flat. Of course, if you just lay the stencil down, it's going to give you a pattern. Something looks like that. But I also will quite often use stencils like this, and what I'll do is I'm slowing this down as much as possible. I will run paint, pull my airbrush and my stencil together, create some hair-like effects. Also, you'll see me use blackbeard wheat just laid down. look something like that. And I also at times will drag it to get that effect. Now if you take a dark over that instead of the light, I think you get the picture. And of course I'm going to come in here and continue to add a little bit of furs, get ready to start putting some color in, and I will start using my texture stencil in a couple of little places, but mostly I'll work freehand in this because we're not getting a great deal of detail. But this is going to be one of the few times that you guys will see me actually working out of the bottle. So currently I'm working with burnt umber, and then I'm going to go ahead and fill it all in. Now I'm not going to flood fill. And this is the benefit of transparent versus using a candy, is I don't have to worry about bleed. So I can use transparent burnt umber, just go ahead and fill in until I get the color that I'm looking for that first layer. And then once I get this color broke down on this first layer, I'll be able to come in and start working another white layer on top of it. Unlike a candy, where the candy would bleed, transparents won't bleed back through that white paint, or at least not very much. Until I clear coat it, it'll do a little bit of bleeding, but very little. Now I'm going to work in and just start bringing in wispy hairs here and there. I'm not going to put near as much paint on as I did in the previous layers, but in this area around the muzzle I'm going to get that very, very bright, but some of that burnt umber will show through. Remember, burnt umber resides in the orange family in hue, so all of your browns have an orangish hue to them usually, so that will take some of the blue shift away when you're working on top of it, because the background color is orange, so you'll get less blue shift going on. Then I just whittle away and bring things forward as I want. I don't want to do a full, covering in here. I could go for a fully realistic look, in which case, it would have maybe made sense to cover it completely in with white. But in this case, I kind of wanted it to appear almost transparent, so that this was looking like it was in the atmosphere. So I didn't want that fully realistic filled in look. I wanted it to be very almost transparent. I could have helped myself a little bit better achieve that effect had I put in some stars before I put in my first layer of paint behind it, and those would have shined through a little bit. You see, of course, I'm building up that nose just a little bit. So any place that I think is too dark, I'm going to just continue to add just little touches in here and create a little bit of brightness. And then not everything is going to have to be shaded in with dagger strokes and lines. As you can see, I'm using my stencils I showed. Some places I'm letting it be just the stencil, and other places I'm letting it drag down. Making sure that I continue all the way through my tape, continue to paint through my tape layers. So when I pull it off, I don't get any kind of funny stuff going on it. Because if you try to paint up to the tape and stop too quickly, too abruptly, then what you'll wind up doing is falling short, which can create some problems. And I'll start to bring in a little bit of finer lines and bring them out and blend them out. Some of them will disappear. You really won't pay attention to them in a picture, but they will be there. You can see that they're in. When we clear coat it, it's going to melt a little bit, so there is going to be a little bit of blending in there because I am using automotive clear coat on this. But it's not going to be too much of a loss of detail. And obviously I'm talking a whole lot through this thing. So what I'm going to do next, and just go ahead as I'm pointing this out, so you guys can watch what I'm doing here, but tell you what I'm going to be doing next. My next color is going to be burnt sienna. Actually, I think I mixed up, I couldn't find my burnt sienna, so I mixed up some yellow ochre and burnt umber together. I didn't quite get as much as I wanted to, so I had to darken that in, and then I will fill that in. That's our second layer, and you can see how those colors will start to blend together. I don't have to pay a whole lot of attention because the burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and umber are pretty close related, so we're not going to get any strange color shifts going on. Use just red straight out of the bottle right there, a transparent red, to blend in that nose. As far as the dark in the eyes, I used burnt umber mixed with just a tiny little bit of black to get those eyes darkened in where they're at. Then, of course, I will come back as I get closer and closer to the end. I'll start detailing little things out. As I said, this is a pretty low detail picture, but one that I think is really, really cool. I'm going to do a lot of that little detail that you see me doing here. Yes, there are a whole lot of dagger strokes going on. The speed at which you're witnessing this is at twice speed. So it's not like, you know, I've got this sped up 5 or 6 times. I do have a lot of stuff cut out of it though. So does not take that long. It ran 53 minutes from the time I started this recording to the end. And so I'm using that blue. Remember I talked about that blue shift not being there, so I'm using that blue in the muzzle there. We'll come back over that with the white, and you probably didn't even notice that blue at first, but you will probably see it from here through the rest of the picture because you know it's in there. Now I did mix up just a little bit of umber in the black that I'm using right here just to give it a little bit of warmth because I didn't want that too cold, too stark, harsh black up against it. And I'll go through here and start to firm in and bring everything out. Of course, putting the nostrils in there, and then I'm going to detail it out. And of course, I thin it out, and you'll see I'll come back over some of them dagger strokes in the bottom chin portion, which will just create some more depth and adding a little bit. But in the outside edges, you'll see how I'm blending that in pretty dark, and that kind of gives it that it's disappearing, like it's disappearing off into the background, knowing that I had you know, a black background that I wanted to disappear so off into a, you know, galaxy or whatever behind you. And then of course putting those little dots in for, you know, I don't even know what those are called correctly. I do want to point out on that section of his muzzle that each of those first strokes, notice how it's like sections. So each section goes down to those sections where those little dots where the hairs come out in. So it's not long strokes there. It is, they end between each section. So you have a dagger stroke between each section of dots, and it kind of rounds out. You'll see it if you look for what I'm talking about. You will see I will come in here and I will use a few small white tiny hairs coming off that. I believe I actually use my Eclipse. Throw some more stars in the left hand side. I believe you guys all know how to do that by now, most of you, and if you don't, you can always message me, but I do have that listed in other videos. And then I'm going to go back to my dark and continue to firm up and make sure as I get closer and closer to the edge, make sure that my proportions are correct, make sure anything in there that needs to be done. And then I'm creating, by these shadows right there, creating a little definition between that hair that comes on the outer edge and that hair that goes inwards, because you got that big mane that comes over the top. Putting a few little dots in there. I was doing that freehand. Decided to just go ahead and grab myself a dot stencil and throw them in there, and that just gives a little bit of illusion of some detail. Like I said, there's not a lot in there, but that gives me a little illusion that it is. And then I will come in and put my final hairs, and those need to be pretty fine. And you can see how that built up depth by doing 2 or 3 layers in different colors, and the final white layer going in right there. And then I am going to touch it with some yellow ochre to get my final coloring. And that is a wrap, guys. You may notice that there's some debris in this clear coat. This has not been buffed or polished yet, so this is what she looks like. Gonna have lots of reflections. Anyways, not been buffed or polished yet. You may notice a little debris in the clear coat. I cleared it on my backyard. Hey guys, I appreciate y'all who stopped by here. I am Bill Kennedy with W. Leon Artistry, and I hope you got something out of the video. Remember to like, comment, share, all that good stuff. And I will leave you guys some links for the equipment and materials that I use down below. You know, shopping those links helps out the channel, helps me keep making videos. And that's gonna be a wrap. Appreciate y'all. Y'all have a good one.